Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, John and Lee proudly present the greatest wrestling show ever!
Right, guys, welcome to episode 13 of the greatest wrestling show ever. And yet again, we've got Matt Hardy in. Matt Hardy, we can't get rid of him. What's going on?
Yeah, slight oversight there.
Wow.
Although for some reason you keep trying to put the blame at my door. I don't know why.
It was your insistence on having the Money in the Bank match. That's what really did it, because TLC 2 is a fairly obvious one to have in.
Yeah.
Money in the Bank, I mean, out of all the Money in the Banks, there's none that massively jump out as being the greatest wrestling match ever. I'm not sure.
Well, it was Ric Flair, wasn't it?
Well, yeah. That's what all Matt Hardy obsessives say. They blame it on Ric Flair or somebody else.
Yeah. Which actually, going back, kind of goes against everything we said from the start. And it was supposed to be more about the matches than it was about the
exactly. Exactly. Well, it's a bit of both, isn't it? We wanted to make sure we included certain wrestlers. I mean, there's the potential if you literally went for the greatest, let's say the top 10 matches that have ever occurred in WWE, it might end up being something like 4 Shawn Michaels matches, 3 Bret Hart ones. You know, there wouldn't be all that much potential. I mean, realistically, you're not going to get a Hogan match in there, are you? His one with The Rock was a great match in some ways, but you wouldn't put it in one of the top 10
of all time.
Yeah, purely for the wrestling alone anyway. So I think we'd agreed right from the start we wanted variety. We wanted a mixture of different types of matches, wanted different titles defended. We wanted to get all the main wrestlers in there. It wasn't purely the 10 or however many best wrestling matches of all time, was it? It's the greatest show, isn't it? And the greatest show doesn't automatically mean the best matches. If anything, WrestleMania 17 that we're about to watch now, or part of it anyway, is a classic example of that. It's considered one of the best WrestleManias of all time. And outside of this match and probably Austin and Rock in the main event, and maybe was there a Benoit angle as well? Other than that, I don't know how many of the matches were particularly great wrestling matches, but there was a good variety. There was things like Big Show, Kane, and Raven in a hardcore match. There was the Legends Battle Royal, which on the face of it is one of the worst matches of all time, but brought something different to the table. There was Vince versus Shane in a street fight, which again, I mean, probably better technically than it had any right to be for the participants, but definitely not a great match, but it fitted in, I think, well with the variety of the show. But anyway, let's get cracking. So if anyone is watching along with this, it's WrestleMania 17, April 1st, April Fool's Day, 2001. We're at the start of the chapter for the TLC match, which is 1 hour, 51 minutes and 22 seconds in. I'm going to press play in 3, 2, 1. So just before we came on here, I think possibly on message, you were just confirming which show this was from. This is, of course, the second TLC match. The first TLC match occurred the previous year at SummerSlam 2000. And I don't know if you know, but the previous WrestleMania, so it's WrestleMania 16, but it was known as WrestleMania 2000 because it was in the year 2000, had a triangle ladder match between Edge and Christian, the Dudleys, and the Hardys. For all intents and purposes, the same match in that it had ladders, it had chairs, and it had tables, but it wasn't as such a TLC match. So really, this is the third time these guys have met under these sort of arrangement, and it's testament to them that they managed to keep getting better and better. This is considered the best of the three and one of the greatest matches of all time, which says their third time out is impressive.
That is impressive because you'd imagine that generally a fight would be repeated if it was so good they wanted to try and capture it again. So to do it again twice and, as you say, get better each time is testament to all of them, isn't it?
It definitely is. Yeah. Now, you weren't watching it all at this time, were you? So you don't really know much about the build up to this.
Correct.
Yeah.
I've seen the match before though.
Cool. So to give you the backstory, at least from my recollection from the time, Matt and Jeff Hardy had been occasional jobbers in WWF from about 1994 onwards. If you look on YouTube, you can see Razor Ramon squashing a young, I think it was Jeff Hardy. You can see Matt Hardy against Nikolai Volkov from about maybe 1995. But coming into 1999, they were regularly competing as a modern day version of the Rockers, wearing sort of day glow, quite garish, pretty crappy looking outfits. They won the tag titles from the Acolytes, the APA as they later became known, Bradshaw and Farouk, in, I want to say, about June of '99. Lost them back relatively quickly. They were managed by Michael Hayes at that point. So they were going somewhere, but not to the position they got eventually. And that changed at No Mercy 1999, where they were paired up in a standard ladder match with also relative newcomers Edge and Christian, which absolutely stole the show. A huge step up in terms of at least the stunt side of it for ladder matches compared to what had been done before. Like the Shawn Michaels Razor Ramon matches, great matches, told great stories, but from a stunt perspective, not a patch on what these guys did at No Mercy and then these 3 matches.
Right.
And then around about that same time, probably late '99, the Dudley Boys, who had made their name in ECW, I think they were 8-time tag champions at the point of leaving, came in. Initially floundered a little bit until they got over by putting people through tables, primarily women, even old women. I remember one episode of Raw, they put was it Mae Young or Fabulous Moolah? I think it was Mae Young. They put her through a table, and I had an argument with it would have been a few years later, because I lived in Sheffield at that point, with my flatmate. The week after they put her through a table in the ring, Bubba Ray Dudley gave Mae Young a powerbomb off the stage through a table onto the concrete floor. So Mae Young was probably 75 at that point, for a guess. And my flatmate said it was no bigger than a normal powerbomb because the table broke the fall. And I was like, she's dropping on her back from a legit, without exaggeration, the stage would be, let's say, 6 to 8 foot, and then she's coming off his shoulders. So she's going a genuine 12-ish feet down onto concrete floor. And I said to him, the thing that finally won the argument for me, I said, if he'd done that off the Empire State Building through a table on the floor, would that still not hurt because there's a table in the way?
Yeah.
And he realised he's being stupid. So they got over with the tables, and then they had that triangle ladder match at WrestleMania 2000, which was defending champions, the Dudleys, having won it the previous month, lost to Edge and Christian. Then they had the first TLC match at SummerSlam, which was built off the back of the fact that those 3 teams had become known for those 3 things. So the Dudleys already there with the tables, Edge and the Hardys already with the ladders. Now, I don't know if Edge and Christian started using chairs with a view to kind of building up to this TLC concept, or if they just started using chairs and it was worked out from there. I remember on an episode of Raw just prior to SummerSlam 2000, Commissioner Mick Foley, who'd retired earlier that year and come back as the Commissioner of Raw, announcing the first ever TLC match. I distinctly remember him going, tables and ladders and chairs, tables, ladders and chairs. The match has begun now. Got a quick start there. Got the Edge and Christian with a ladder about to knock down both Hardys. Quite a level of planning and thought must go into a match like this. You know, any match really does, but when you've got 6 different people doing all those different spots with such a tight margin for error, impressive.
Want a quiz question?
Definitely, yeah.
For the Hardy Boys, they got their start in Omega Wrestling.
Yeah.
What do the letters Omega, or OMEGA, stand for?
Organisation of Modern Extreme Grappling Arts.
Well done.
Whew, look at that. I've not thought about that for 20 years, but it's in there somewhere.
I didn't think I'd have you on that one.
Oh, mate, it takes some beating, me. That was their own sort of essentially backyard, whatever you call it, promotion that they organised, which out of all the backyard promotions must have had by far the highest success, because obviously Matt and Jeff Hardy came out of it. You also had Shannon Moore and the other one that were in WCW at this point, but came over to WWE and had a fairly successful career. Shane Helms, Hurricane. If you remember the Hurricane, don't know if you saw him later on. So those 2 were there as well, and I think there might have been another one who also made it to WWE or WCW, whose name is escaping me at the moment, but out of essentially a small local backyard federation running, I think it was the Hardys' backyard in their dad's farm, to have 5 of them go on to become well-known superstars, 2 of them to become world champions is pretty impressive.
No, that's incredible.
I
So
saw
do
a
you
video.
know? Do you know the name of the stable that Edge formed with Gangrel and Christian?
The Brood.
Yeah, is that an easy one?
Yeah, Gangrel's my mate, you know.
Again?
Gangrel's my mate.
Really?
Yeah, Gangrel used to come over for All Star for years on end. I know Gangrel fairly well. I've still got him on Facebook. Still occasionally like and comment on his stuff. A funny guy, Gangrel. Crazy. Do you know he used to be married to, go out with, etc. Luna Vachon, if you remember her?
Yes, I do, but no, I didn't do that.
Yeah, I don't think their time in WWE ever particularly crossed over. So Luna was around in the early 90s, and I feel was probably gone by the time Gangrel came in the sort of mid to late 90s. Quite a volatile relationship, that one, from what I've heard and what he's told me.
Well, from both sides.
Very much so, I think. Yeah, he's got actual fangs. Gangrel. He's filed his teeth into fangs like a vampire.
Oh, God, I remember you telling me that.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh.
Dudley's doing the "What's Up" spot. Do you remember that was a big thing around this time from the Budweiser advert?
Yes.
So Dudley's used to do exactly that. They'd slam their opponent into the middle of the ring. Bubba would hold his legs in that position. Devon would essentially drop a headbutt to his balls from the top rope, whilst they both went, "What's up?" like the Bud advert. They did carry that on for years afterwards, to the point where I think it, one of those spots that perhaps outstayed its welcome a little bit.
Yeah. So do you remember the name of the brother of the Dudley boys who competed between 2001 and 2005?
Spike.
Yes.
Yeah, little Spike Dudley, LSD. There was lots of Dudleys, you know. Only 3 of them made it to WWE, but there were several others in ECW that didn't make it any further than that. I think the original was the original one, Dudley. And then there was Dancers with Dudley, who did like a Native American gimmick. Big Dick Dudley. Then there's a few others. If I remember correctly, Big Dick Dudley feuded with another guy called Big Dick Hertz. A clever play on words.
Brilliant.
Okay, so Bubba there's just given Jeff a power bomb through Edge through a table. Wow.
Well, you won't hear that because Edge broke his ball.
Exactly, yeah. Just like under a pillow, isn't it? I remember watching some matches at the time and... Say again?
You say tables was their thing?
Yeah, for the Dudleys, yeah. It had been in ECW. So the originator of the table spot was actually Sabu. He started putting people through tables in ECW in Japan in maybe 1993. And he's well known as the originator of it, but then the Dudleys very much took it to the next level in ECW in probably 97, 98, that sort of time period, where I think pretty much every match of theirs was just a sequence of big spots and people moving through tables. Little in the way of wrestling or linking things together, just spot after spot after spot. They did the match of the first ever ECW pay-per-view, which was barely legal in April 1997. It was the Dudleys, who were not all that well known at the moment, against the Eliminators, which was slated just for being a sequence of spots. People just kind of standing around waiting to do the next spot and then moving into position and spot and what have you. And I think even when they came into WWE 2 years later, I think very much their reputation was they couldn't actually wrestle. They could just do spots. So they had to prove that wasn't the case. Both Bubba Ray and Devon trained by the same guy, Johnny Rodz, who was a wrestler in WWF and elsewhere in probably the early 80s. He trained Damien Demento, if I remember correctly. He trained Julio Torres, who wrestled as a Brooklyn Brawler over in England for All Star. I wrestled Julio probably 20 times, I reckon. I remember mentioning he was trained by the same guys that trained the Dudleys and co.
He came with WWF UK Rampage.
Johnny Rodz did?
Brooklyn Brawler?
Brooklyn Brawler. No, it's not that Brooklyn Brawler. It's not the original. It's not the actual Brooklyn Brawler. It's someone else using the Brooklyn Brawler gimmick on the UK scene a number of years later. If the UK Rampage tour might have had Damien Demento on, though. Do you remember him?
No.
Big, tall, muscly guy with a sort of shaven head, looked a bit like a bit of a wild man. I don't think I particularly watched it.
They were all proper superstars apart from the Brooklyn Brawler, who I always regarded as a jobber with a title.
You wouldn't have been using the word jobber at the time. What did you call him?
Little man.
Little man. That was it. Little man. Oh, here comes Spike Dudley. Speaking of Spike, here he comes out.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So if I remember correctly, in this match, all three teams have essentially a third person associated with them who comes out and does something. So Spike is coming out here to help the Dudley boys. Matt and Jeff Hardy have got Lita, who I think makes an appearance at some point. And Edge and Christian have partnered with Rhino, who is going to appear at some point as well. Rhino having only just left ECW, what must have been a couple of weeks before. He was their final ever world and TV champion at their point of folding. Oh, look at that.
Oh, nice.
So that move in WWE was called a Dudley Dog. In ECW, it was called, there's Rhino. In ECW, it was called the Acid Drop, based off the Little Spike Dudley LSD, clever. And there we go, Rhino goring Bubba, goring Matt through a table in the corner. I was just about to say before, I remember at the time watching matches like this and the commentator, Jim Ross, normally saying something like, these guys will never be the same. They'll never recover from a match like this. And I didn't really appreciate that actually there was an element of truth to that. Like, to me, it just seemed like it's a big match. And obviously there were big bumps, but I thought these guys do it 200 days a year. It's not that big a deal. But in retrospect, the number of these guys that have had neck fusion surgery and painkiller addictions and everything else suggests that... Yeah. There you go, look at Lita and Edge. She was gentle with him there, wasn't she? Precursor of things to come in a few years.
Yeah.
Low blow by Spike there. What's Lita going to do? She's going up top. Did she do a moonsault to the floor or something? Oh, it's a Hurricane Rhino to Rhino. Look at that. See a thong as usual. You got any more quiz questions for me?
Which singles title did Bubba Ray Dudley win during his time in WWE?
Hardcore title, I would have thought.
Correct. How many times? No, here's a good one. What type of match did Edge and Kurt Angle have at Judgment Day 2002?
Hair match.
Hair versus hair, yeah.
Yeah, that's where Angle shaved his head. And credit to him, of all the stipulations in wrestling that have been ignored days, weeks, or months later, 18 years later, Angle still got a shaven head.
Was that when it started?
Yeah, he had a full head of hair before that match, and he was receding, and I would assume, there we go, 3D on Lita. Goodness me. Violence against women at this point in time was a big thing that the crowd generally cheered.
Definitely encouraged.
It was, yeah, sort of thing that... It's funny now, in some ways, it's weird, like, in some ways nowadays you have a lot more equality. Women are seen as the equal of men. They're superstars. They're not divas, etc. But the idea of a man beating up a woman is generally still frowned upon. Whereas back then, man beating up a woman, absolutely fine.
There's an element of equality there, isn't there, with her taking hits.
Exactly. She comes in and gives a Hurricane Rhino to Rhino, gets a spear for her trouble. It's, all's fair and what have you. I'm a little bit torn as well. At the moment, there is quite a big push. Here comes Jeff, swanton off a big old ladder there. That is a big ladder. I remember Royal Rumble 2000 was shown on Channel 4. They did an arrangement where they showed 4 pay-per-views in 2000 and possibly 2001. And I remember Jeff doing the swanton off the entranceway at MSG. Here he comes. Ooh. Off a ladder through Bubba Ray Dudley, I think it would have been. He's just come up a very high ladder there, taking Spike and Rhino through a couple of ringside tables. I mean, that's where Jeff's painkiller addictions began, I think. So I was starting to say there anyway, in modern wrestling, there's a lot more intergender wrestling, a lot more mixed tags, and a lot more man versus woman straight up matches. And I'm still a bit undecided on that. Part of me likes the whole equality side of it. But then there's a massive part of me that just doesn't like seeing a man hitting a woman.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that makes me old-fashioned or sexist or what have you, but...
Well, that's old-fashioned. No, I'm the same. I think it's just something ingrained in me. It's, yeah.
I think part of the problem as well is it almost it takes me out of that moment of disbelief as well. So when the man's hitting the woman, and I don't really like it, and then when the woman's hitting the man, unless they're somewhat well matched from a size perspective, often it's a woman who's half the size of the man. So it takes me out of the moment in exactly the same way that a tiny man beating up a large man would do. It's just a reminder that it's a work and it's a pre-planned spot. Yeah. Oh, this is a big spot coming up. So you've got, is that Christian and Devon hanging off the belts at the top? Jeff's on a ladder in the corner. Now, this isn't the spear off the ladder, because that's on Edge, isn't it? No, so Christian's fallen off. What's Jeff going to do? Is he try and walk across these 3 ladders, if I remember correctly? He doesn't. Look at him. Wow. That's a gutsy spot, that is. Fair play to him. Oh, no. Oh, no. Oh, no. Oh, timber! Didn't work. Unlucky Jeff.
So is that Edge hiding under the...
yeah, I think... Is this the one where the big... Yeah, this is it. So Jeff is about to get a left hanging from the strap or whatever it is, and Edge gives him the spear off the ladder in one of the most replayed spots of possibly all time. So they continued feuding on and off these 3 in different ways for a number of years after this. TLC 3 or possibly 4 was a match. Here we go, big spear. Ooh, that's going to hurt. That's a big bump.
That's incredible.
And I think if I remember correctly, I'm not sure if they've changed the ring at that point. I know in 1998 when Mick Foley did Hell in a Cell match and took those massive bumps, that was still on the old-fashioned, really hard ring. I think perhaps by this point they'd changed the ring design a little bit to make it a bit softer, but it's probably still got less give than a modern ring has now, nearly 20 years later. And taking a flat back bump from the legit, how high is his back there? 12 foot? 13, 14 foot? His shoulders there are twice the height of Bubba Ray Dudley, aren't they? That's 12 plus foot, isn't it?
But they absolutely nailed it as well.
Yeah.
Moves like that, pretty much one shot.
Oh, another massive. It's massive spot after massive spot. So you've just had Bubba Ray and Matt Hardy there go off a massive ladder in the ring, over the top rope, through 4 tables at ringside. Wow. Got any more quiz questions for me?
So, who did Christian and Lance Storm defeat for the Tag Team Championship at Vengeance 2002?
Edge and Hogan?
Yeah, that's safe.
On a fucking rampage here, man. Can't stop me.
Who's the oldest Dudley boy?
Out of these 3?
Yeah.
I'm assuming it's not Spike. He looks considerably younger. Going to go Bubba Ray?
God's sake.
That was a 50-50 chance, really. He just looks marginally older than Devon. Both Bubba Ray and Devon went on to singles success in TNA a number of years later. Bubba Ray was initially there we go. Rhino's given Christian a shoulder ride up the ladder and is taking the tag belts out before Devon could get there. Yeah, so they ended up in TNA in 2005, at which point Bubba was massive, like proper fat, a beast, huge. He was known as Brother Ray, and Devon was known as Brother Devon, because obviously their Bubba Ray and Devon Dudley names were copyright, whatever the term is. Yeah. A few years later, after he dropped a load of weight and got in great shape, Bully Ray, as he was then known, became the TNA World Heavyweight Champion and had a great run, which involved him turning on Hulk Hogan and going out with his daughter, Brooke.
No.
Yeah. Worth a little flick if you can find a 5-minute summary on YouTube. I remember it being a well-done storyline that definitely elevated someone like that who you wouldn't necessarily have thought had that in him, so to speak.
I think the first thing I'm going to go and look for is 75-year-old women getting powerbombed through tables.
Oh, it's huge. Yeah, you'll find it instantly. It's a massive bump. Fair play to her. Apparently, just before it, she was talking to Bubba Ray, and I don't know what he was saying, but basically she was concerned he was going to be gentle with her. So she started slapping him in the face and basically saying, "You better powerbomb me properly."
Spirit.
This is the same old lady as well who, when they used to do the Bronco Buster, which if you've never seen it, is originally X-Pac's move, where your opponent is sat down in the corner, so your shoulder blades are on the bottom rope corner. You run and essentially jump so that your legs go either side of their head, and you kind of hit them in the face with your groin area. Well, she used to do that, and she used to stick rotten fish down her knickers before she did it.
Oh boy.
So as I say, imagine a 75-year-old woman's crotch in your face. It's probably not the most fun anyway, but with rotten fish in there as well, it's maybe even less so.
I've got one last question. It's quite appropriately timed as well. How many times did Edge and Christian win the tag team championship together?
Ooh, that's a tricky one. Now, I think Edge ended up something like a 10-time tag champion, and he won it with a few other people, but mainly Christian. So I'm going to say 7.
For God's sake.
Is that right?
Spot on.
Full marks. Full marks today. Happy with that. So are they the team that have held the tag titles more than anyone else, or is it something like the New Day overtaking them now?
Yeah, I think New Day are up to 10 or 11 times, aren't they?
Possibly. Maybe not quite that many, but I think they'll be over 7. Not sure. Right, that was an absolute cracker of a match. Barn burner, stormer, if you will. And as I said, you can see why actually the participants were never the same again. It didn't take all that many of them for, a number of those guys to have painkiller addictions, spinal problems. Edge broke his neck in 2003-4, which, off the back of a few years of that was only a matter of time, I'd have thought.
Yeah.
So we've got left, is it Bret Austin next and then Punk Cena? Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Bret Austin is a cracker as well. There's a lot of backstory and follow-up story to that. So that's a really good one to have in the semi-final position.
I can't wait.
Awesome. Right, guys. We'll see you next week for the penultimate episode.